Great evening, everyone. My name is Kimberly Gilgeours, and I have to just say, I was sitting here listening to the stories so far, and I don't know about anyone else, but I'm definitely moved and motivated by what my fellow sisters here are talking about. I've been taking some notes feverishly as well. What are some of the key takeaways? And so I wanted to just share my story with you all briefly as well. So, my story is called The Game of Life because I remember as a child, I was raised by a single mom, and my mother would play this game with me. It was called The Game of Life. And just to give you a little history about it, if you didn't know, The Game of Life is actually a game that is the oldest board game in U.S. history. It was developed in 1860, and the whole premise of the game was to walk through life on a board around all the different things that someone could experience in their lifetime, from college all the way through to retirement. And on this board, you experience things like buying a home and saving and having children. And I loved it because it was the only thing one of the games that we played a lot. And I always would marvel how my mother would weave these stories into this board game, not realizing that she was teaching me life lessons along the way. And the game of life, one of the things that I took away from that is that life is like a game. There are different things that we experience and that we go through. And it's about one, being prepared for them as best that one can, and also taking from those experiences and learning from them for the next part or the next space, if you will, on the board, right, in the game of life. So my story began when we moved to Long Island. So I'm from New York, and my family moved into a neighborhood where there were no other people that looked like us. In fact, the way we were able to purchase our home is that my father's friend, who was an attorney, represented that he was buying this home, but it was actually my family, and we moved in. Luckily, the neighborhood embraced our family for the most part. And very early on, my mother found herself on her own. And I watched and I looked how we lived a certain way in this same neighborhood on the same block, and everybody else lived a vastly different life. And it just baffled me, like, why was it so different? Why was I wearing, clothes that my mother had to sew just to keep together, and everyone else was getting new clothes and wearing designer things. And so what I realized was that I needed to go to work and I needed to figure out how money worked. And that's what I actually did. My first corporate job was with a very large investment bank in Manhattan on Wall Street. And listening to Elle talk about not pushing back on the disparities that she was seeing, and listening to Nakai talk about the disparities she saw, I sometimes have to ask myself, was I blind? Because when I started working in the investment field, I was the only Black female in the whole group of men working in investments. I came in with very specific job. My job was to automate a manual process that they had. And I put up and dealt with so many things that I really thought was normal, where, told to go get coffee and told, no, you don't need to know that. That's too much for you to handle. And one of the things that I realized during that time is what sustained me was that my goals, my objectives were far bigger than any obstacle that could be placed in front of me. My goal was to make enough money, to learn about how money worked, so that my family, my mother and I, didn't have to struggle as I saw that we were doing versus what I saw with my neighbors who were going on vacations, who were getting new cars. I remember my mom and I together, I learned how to work on a car as a young kid because we had one car. We had to figure out, how to fix it and all those kinds of things. So when I had the opportunity and learned that I could share my story about equality, I was very moved. And I was moved because I look at where we are now. Elle talked about the pendulum swinging wide and far, right? So that we could get to a place where we really have more of equality across all spectrums. And when I look at what we're going through now and the movement of women and what we're fighting for, not just here, let's not forget our sisters abroad, right, who are in many countries going through major tumultuous times. But when I look at all of that and I look at what I went through, I'm humbled, because the things that we are fighting for and the things that we are making issue about and raising the bar on are things when I was coming up, we would have never thought to do that. Or maybe I just never knew that that was an option. I came up at a time where I thought if a man called you, whatever he called you, or treated you a kind of way, or made accusations or had inappropriate conversation with you, that was just part of what it was to get to where you needed to be. And so I really am impressed with where we've come. But to Elle's point, and as Nakai shared in her story, we have a long way to go, ladies. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think being able to share our stories about what we've been through is very, very important, so that people know that they're not alone, so that women know that there are people that have walked this path before them. And maybe we didn't have as many options as exist now today, but we had experiences that can help the next generation continue this movement forward. I remember a very specific incident. I was probably at my third investment bank. And so it was a little bit more diverse, not much. There were just more women, but there was still no one that looked like me. And at the time, I was managing a group of people from men and women. We had about 3 women. 2 of them were more in an administrative role. I was in a management role. And then we had a lot of gentlemen that worked with us as well. And I remember this very specific incident. We were sitting around the boardroom table. All the walls were glass. This was in Lower Manhattan. I could see right out to the Statue of Liberty. And we were talking about a specific project that we needed to get completed. And during that conversation, everyone is sharing their ideas. And my job was to help collect all the ideas and then put them together in a project that we were all going to collectively work on. And everyone shared their ideas. And then it came to me. And, you know, as I was moderating the whole meeting as well, I picked up some of the key points. And then I talked about 1 or 2 things that I thought we needed to include in the mix. And I remember very distinctly, to my left was a gentleman who's been with us, was with us for quite some time. And as I was talking, I visibly watched him get redder and redder. And, you know, maybe I was naive. I really couldn't understand why he was getting red. And at first, I really thought that maybe he just wasn't feeling well. But what I realized very quickly as he went from red to shaking was that he was angry. And he was angry. What I learned was he was angry because he felt like the position that I had and the direction I was taking the project in was something he should have been able to do. And he could not contain himself. And he stood up from the table and he picked up a chair and he threw this chair in my general direction. So if I was sitting at the head of the table, it was to my left, the chair landed to my right in the corner. And we ended the meeting. And I remember distinctively going to HR saying, this is unacceptable. Something has to be done. You know, here is what occurred. And we were brought into a room together, myself, this gentleman, HR, and I recounted what occurred very calmly. And 2 things came out of that meeting. One was, well, was he really throwing it at you? Maybe it just slipped. I don't know how a chair that is raised above your head can slip, but maybe it just slipped. And the other thing that was shared with me is that I was too sensitive and that I needed to be a stronger individual to deal in the workplace. So I share this story because while we don't see things happen, at least I hope not, in that same scenario where people are throwing things, the hostility still remains. And as we're going through life, we have to understand the experiences that we have. They should make us stronger, but we have to continue to fight for the respect that we deserve in every place, whether it's the workplace, whether it's in the home, whether it's in the academia, in the schools. We must continue to fight for that equality, because not only do we deserve it, we have so much to offer. I'm encouraged with what I'm seeing happen both in all different areas here in the United States and abroad. But ladies, we have a lot of work to do. And it's my hope and my goal that my story and the stories that you're hearing of my fellow panelists will help to inspire and encourage you all to continue the fight, to band together, and to be able to make a difference, not only now, but for future generations.